Best of luck on doing so.
I call the honourable member Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, wasn't it an interesting contribution there from the Minister? An incredibly disappointing one too, because the Labour Party, and in particular the Honourable Damien O'Connor, have gone to considerable lengths on this bill to try to find an outcome that assures New Zealanders and assures farmers and Fonterra shareholders that this will be a robust process by which New Zealanders and farmers will know that the value of Fonterra remains largely in the hands of New Zealanders. And to have the Minister stand up and say that this is something that should only be dealt with by the Fonterra shareholders, should only be dealt with in the constitutional process, ignores the fact that this whole bill is before Parliament, because Parliament is making the acknowledgement that we need to look after our largest company, that farmers fundamentally want to see the cooperative status of Fonterra retained. So that's what farmers want, and the concern that is out there is in fact that this is a precursor to saying that Fonterra should be floated on the stock market. And it's all very well for the Minister to say, well, that's not going to happen. Well, John Key said he thought it would be great. He said he thought it would be great if Fonterra was floated out on the stock market. And so farmers will not be assured by the Minister standing up today and dismissing the notion of a legislative statutory limit around what can be on-sold in terms of shares within the newly established cooperative. A constitutional limit is all well and good, and that may or may not be the outcome of a future vote among the Fonterra shareholders. What Parliament gets to do is make a law that assures what New Zealanders, what farmers want, that the cooperative status is retained, and that New Zealanders know that the interests of Fonterra will remain largely in New Zealand hands. At the moment, that assurance is not here in this bill. And I think it's perfectly legitimate for members of Parliament like Damien O'Connor to propose, as he has in his supplementary order paper, a limit of interest in terms of cooperative shares. It's perfectly legitimate. It also comes from discussions with Fonterra and from discussions with farmers. And the Minister likes to make a lot of the mandate question. The problem is what we don't know for sure today is how many actual farmers support this. Not the vote in terms of interest in milk solids, but how many actual farmers. And it could be as little as 50%. We could have half of the farmers involved in Fonterra who actually don't support this proposal. So why not then give some assurance to the people of New Zealand? Why not give some assurance to the farmers? Why not give some assurance to everybody who cares about protecting the cooperative status and support the SOP? Why not do that? Because that would give the assurance that New Zealanders are looking for. But instead what it does is leave open the suspicion, Mr. Chair, that this government wants to float Fonterra. That's what John Key said. He thought it would be great. And so that's why it is deeply disappointing, Mr. Chair, to hear from the Minister that he doesn't intend to support the idea of some kind of legislated cap. We know that there are farmers out there who do think this is the thin end of the wedge in terms of demutualisation, and New Zealanders overwhelmingly, and we would have thought the government would have picked this up in recent months over the asset sales debate, New Zealanders overwhelmingly are concerned about the idea that the value in our primary sector is going to go overseas, that the value of what we own and what we control as New Zealanders is going to disappear, that the notion of a cooperative that has served our country incredibly well over the recent decades will now lose that ability because there is no cap, because we cannot be absolutely certain about where this will go. We've proposed, or Damien O'Connor has proposed in his SOP, a cap that's 3% higher than what Fonterra is looking at in terms of its own constitution. That's wise because it gives Fonterra the ability to manage what may or may not happen in terms of the movement of shares, the changes that might happen at random that would push them over the 20% cap. We think the National Party can support this. We think the National Party knows that it's a good idea. The Minister's shaking his head, but the National Party knows this is a good idea because it provides assurance. If they don't support it, if the Minister says, no, we're not going to do that, then all that does is open up the suspicion. When Nathan Guy says he's told me that, what he's telling New Zealanders, what the Minister's telling New Zealanders, is that there will be no legislative guarantee about the interests of Fonterra staying in New Zealand hands. That's what the Minister's getting, Mr Chair.
The Honourable Member Grant Robertson.
That's what the Minister's telling New Zealanders, that there's no guarantee, that this government isn't concerned about whether the value of Fonterra stays in New Zealanders' hands. It isn't concerned about whether half of farmers may not actually support this. So, Mr Chair, it is deeply disappointing from the Labour Party's point of view that this supplementary order paper that Damien O'Connor has put up, which actually has been worked through with Fonterra, is not being supported. This is not something that the Labour Party is doing, as the Minister might allege, because we don't understand the bill or we're trying to curry some kind of favour. It's because farmers around New Zealand are worried about this. And all the government needs to do is support an SOP like this that will bring the House together behind our largest company. And we do want to be able to support Fonterra in what it does, support it in retaining its cooperative status. So, Mr Chair, it's quite clear from the Labour Party's point of view that the government does not believe that it has an obligation to provide certainty for New Zealanders. It does not believe that it needs to protect those billions of dollars of assets that are in cooperative hands inside New Zealand, but rather to open this up without assurance for the future control of those profits. And, Mr Chair, it is deeply disappointing, and unfortunately, from the Labour Party's point of view, this puts in danger our support of this bill when a simple agreement to something that Fonterra themselves want would enable Labour to support the bill.
I call the Honourable Member Shane Ardern.
Mr Chairman, it is a